Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams today. We are going to be doing a shelf spotlight today, which I kind of skipped doing in September. I just didn't realize that I didn't do one. What a shelf spotlight is, if you haven't seen one of these videos before, is where I just pick a topic or a category or a type of book or books with something specific on the covers, etc., etc. And I show all the books that are on my shelves or a handful of books from my shelves that fit that category. So this time around for October, I am going to be talking about books that deal with time in some way. So time travel or playing with time in some sort of way. Sometimes when I do a shelf spotlight, I skew heavily on books that I have not yet read because I do have so many that I haven't yet read. But today, the majority of the books I'm going to share with you are books that I actually have already read. So I have 11 that I have read and 4 that I have not yet read. So I don't know too much about the ones that I haven't yet read, only what I've heard from other people. So of the ones that I have read, of the 11, there are ones that deal with time in different ways. So the first 4 that I have are kind of straight time travel books. And I love these because time travel is technically science fiction, right? But these are all a bit of genre busters. They have multiple genres. And for me, I think of 3 of these as kind of historical fiction. Well, one is kind of fantasy. I don't know. These all fit multiple different genres. So the first one that I want to talk about today is so good. Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I didn't really love Parable of the Sower, which is the only other book by her that I read, but I did love Kindred. And in Kindred, we follow this woman in the 1970s. She's newly married, and one day she gets sucked back into time onto a pre-Civil War Southern plantation. She's a Black woman and wearing pants and just with a 1970s mentality, which is very different from now. So even the 1970s is slightly historical, but then she goes back even farther in time. And when she first goes back in time, she rescues this boy from a river who's about to drown, a white boy, and finds out that throughout the book, she and this boy are somewhat connected. And throughout the book, she figures out how she goes back and forth through time because it happens more than once. It's just really good, very thought-provoking, very hard. Some of the scenes in this book are definitely impressed in my mind because it was pretty, I don't want to say graphic, but it was hard-hitting for sure, but it was so good. And so Kindred is a book that I would recommend if you're interested in some time travel. Another one that I read more recently is Diane Chamberlain's The Dream Daughter. This was my first Diane Chamberlain book, and I heard about this because of Katie and Meredith from the Currently Reading podcast. But I also know a number of people who love Diane Chamberlain. I think of Nicole from the Girly Girl Bookworm has been singing the praises of Diane Chamberlain for quite a while, and I'm so glad I finally picked up her books because I absolutely love her. This was her book that came out most recently, I believe. She had a more recent one. I think this is her most recent release. And it, from what I've heard from other people, it's very different from the other books that she's written because it does have time travel in it, which is not her normal situation. Diane Chamberlain is a fantastic storyteller. And in this one, there's a woman in the 1970s, who is pregnant, and her baby has some kind of defect, maybe when she's first born or when she finds out when she's still pregnant, I forget. Learns that her brother-in-law is from the future, and he can help her get to the future where science and medicine has advanced enough that the situation that her baby is facing could be dealt with in the future. So this struggle of how to get there and what to do, and that whole thing. It was so good. I was totally caught up with this story and thought it was fantastic. I need to go a little bit faster because I have a lot of books to talk about. Of course, we have Outlander by Diana Gabaldon, which is also very historical. It's 1945. Claire and her husband are both back from the war, and their various roles that they played are kind of having a second honeymoon, getting to reacclimate to each other in Scotland. They split up one afternoon to do some different things, and Claire ends up at these standing stones and is catapulted back in time to the 1700s, 1743, where Scotland is in the midst of a war, and she is quickly caught up in the midst of situation in 1700s. Very graphic on some of the intense brutality and sexual scenes in here. So if that's not your thing, be aware of that. But the historical element is very cool, and the time travel element is very cool as well. And this is the beginning of what is now, I believe, a 9-book series. Huge. And the last one that's straight time travel is Stravaganza, City of Masks by Mary Hoffman. This is the beginning of a middle grade / early YA series where this young boy goes back in time to Venice. And I forget how and why that exactly happens, but he's in Venice and he kind of goes back in time to an earlier version of what Venice was. And I really enjoyed this first one. It's been maybe 5 years, I think, since I've read it, but I do think I want to continue with the series. I may need to reread this first one before moving on, but I really enjoyed learning about Venice in its 2 different time periods. It was very cool. Some other ones that deal with time, but not in a strict time travel sense. We have What Alice Forgot by Leanne Moriarty. In this one, Alice is 29 years old, loves her husband, pregnant with their first kid. Something happens and she wakes up on the floor of a gym. She just had a major accident and her husband are at odds. It's 10 years later. She's now 39 years old. And she has to figure out what happened. Why did she lose this 10 years of her life? And what happened in between, and why are things so drastically different? She never would have imagined that she would end up in the place where she did. So what really went down? That one was really good. Another author who writes novels that kind of play with time but also have a historical element is Susanna Kearsley. The first Susanna Kearsley that I read was The Rose Garden, and I absolutely love this one. This woman goes to the Cornish coast to kind of release the ashes of her sister, I believe, who just recently passed away. And while there, kind of discovers this portal, like, sort of thing. It's hard to explain, but she sees and meets somebody who is from the past in this old house on the Cornish coast. Very atmospheric and so much fun. Another one of hers that I read and really enjoyed is The Winter Sea. And in this one, there's an author who's researching a book that she's writing about Scotland. So she goes to the Scottish coast, and while there, she starts kind of having these dreams or visions of her characters and realizes that there's more fact than imagination in these dreams that she's having. So there's something about her memory where she's actually kind of living or experiencing these events that she's writing about in her novel. So there's this memory time travel type of thing. It's not quite time travel, but it deals with her memory and actually remembering some of these events. Or is she? Very good. I loved that one as well. Also very atmospheric. Susanna Kearsley does so good with atmosphere. Another middle grade that plays with time is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. This is a Newbery Award winner, and it's so weird. It's so weird. This is the first in a quintet of books, I believe. That's what you call a 5-book series. And in this one, Meg and her little brother and a friend of theirs get kind of transported on this journey, in a sense, to go find her father, but they experience all of these weird things that all have to do with time, and it is very strange. But a lot of fun as well. I have a Christian fiction here called Black by Ted Decker. This is an author that I used to love. I haven't read anything by him in a really long time, but this one is different because our main character, Thomas Hunter, is caught up in this very dangerous situation in the real world, but when he falls asleep, he wakes up in another world. So it's not exactly time that gets played with, but it is because every time he's awake, he's in one world, and when he sleeps, he's in another world. So there's this whole element, and they kind of echo each other. There's echoes of each other of the 2 worlds within the other worlds, but one is definitely more fantastical and fantasy, it's like inspired world, and then one is very real and very dangerous, and both are very dangerous in their own way. It's a wild ride, but I really enjoyed that one. Back in the day, that's the beginning of a quartet now. I believe there's 4 of them. And the last author that I've read that plays with time is Blake Crouch. And these are pretty straightforward science fiction, I would say. Dark matter. In this one, our main character, Jason, I don't know what happens to him. He gets kidnapped or something and knocked unconscious. And when he wakes up, his life is not exactly the life that he knows. And it kind of plays with the idea of multiple realities in a way. So that one was super cool and confusing, but the story definitely drew me in. And the same with this one, Recursion. He just has a way of drawing me right in. And in Recursion, we deal more with memory and whether or not the memories that we have are true or false. And so there's like a neuroscientist involved, and it deals with memory and what you remember may or may not be what actually happened. So those kind of deal with time in a little bit of a different way, but I'm including them in this video because it's my video. And then finally, I have 4 books that I have not yet read that I believe also have something to do with time. For sure, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Addie LaRue makes a deal with the devil ultimately, and she can live forever. So she has immortality, but the consequence is that nobody's going to remember her until one day somebody does. So that's like the very basic storyline of this, but it deals with that immortal life. And so that one definitely plays with some time things. I have 2 books by this author, Matt Haig, The Midnight Library and How to Stop Time. And I don't really know too much about either of them. In this one, you get to like kind of face the choices that you made in your life and possibly see how things would be different if you make a different choice or if you had made a different choice. The books in the Midnight Library enable Nora to live as if she had done things differently. Each one contains a different life, a possible world in which she has made different choices. And I believe the Midnight Library is kind of like a purgatory, like in between life and death situation. I know that this has had some mixed reviews, but I'm still very curious about that one. And then in this one, How to Stop Time, we also have somebody who's been alive for a really long time. He looks like an ordinary 41-year-old Tom, but because of a rare condition, he's been alive for centuries. He's performed with Shakespeare. He's shared cocktails with F. Scott Fitzgerald. Everything starts to unravel when he catches the eye of this captivating woman. Caught between the danger of discovery and the desire to build a real life, Tom learns that the thing he can't have may be the thing that can save him. So that sounds really good as well. And then finally, the one that I'm probably most excited for of these ones I haven't read is Amy Harmon's What the Wind Knows. And I know this one takes place in Ireland. In an unforgettable love story, a woman's impossible journey through the ages could change everything. So Anne grew up enchanted by her grandfather's stories of Ireland. Heartbroken by his death, she travels to his childhood home to spread his ashes. There, overcome with memories of the man she adored and consumed by a history she never knew, she is pulled into another time. So I don't really want to know too much more, but she does go back to 1921, where Ireland is kind of on the brink of a war and a super dangerous place to wake up. But Anne finds herself there disoriented and under the care of a doctor, guardian to a young boy who is oddly familiar. Is that Grandpa? I don't know. But yeah, I have heard such high praise for What the Wind Knows. For some people, it's their favorite Amy Harmon. It will be my 3rd when I do read it, and I'm sure I'm gonna love it because I've loved her other 2 books that I've read. So those are the books that I have on my shelves that deal with time in some way. I may have others that I just don't know about yet that I haven't read or that I've just had forgotten. So, but I feel like 15 is a pretty good number to share with you. I would love to know, are time travel books or time books your thing? Do you like to read books that play with time or that cross genres like these ones do? For the most part, let's chat about all of these things or anything else you want to talk about. You guys know I love talking with you down in the comments. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I will talk to you in another video very soon. Bye.